Shah Gul Rezaie is a human rights activist and former politician from Afghanistan. From 2005 to 2021, she was a member of parliament, and she served as member and deputy head of the Commission on Women's Affairs, Civil Society and Human Rights. She was also the chairperson of the Central Audit and Law Enforcement Oversight Commission during those years. Shah Gul Rezaie is a well-known figure in Afghanistan's media, addressing issues related to women and human rights, the peace process, and minority rights. She was a member of the official delegation that attended the Bonn II conference in 2011, and also participated in the 2 days Doha Qatar intra-Afghan dialogue in 2019, and the Oslo Forum and the Oslo intra-Afghan dialogue in 2022. After the takeover of the Taliban in 2021, she has continued her activism from exile and is now living here in Norway, and we are proud to have her here. Thank you so much. Cecilie Hellestveit is a lawyer with a PhD in international humanitarian law from the University of Oslo and a social scientist with a background in area and conflict studies. I feel that what represents all our panelists is that they are not only one thing, they are very accomplished. She's been associated with a number of research institutes in Norway and abroad, and teaches and researches in the field of international law and the use of force, international humanitarian law, and armed conflict, with an empirical emphasis on the broader Middle East. Cecilie Hellestveit is also a member of the Council of Ethics for the Government Pension Fund Global, and is currently a member of the Governmental Commission to Counter Extremism. You can also give her a round. And then Mahmood Amiry-Moghaddam, who said yes to joining us yesterday. We are very thankful for that. We had to change the program a bit because Madie Golro, who was supposed to join us, is unfortunately unable to join due to health reasons. So we called Mahmood and he said, I'm in Paris, but my flight will land at 4, so I think I should make it. And he did. Mahmood is the head of Iran Human Rights, a human rights organization working on Iran, based here in Norway, but then working internationally. He is also, in addition, or I don't know which one of those is in addition, a neuroscientist and a professor at the University of Oslo. In Paris, Iran Human Rights just launched the annual report on the death penalty in Iran. So we're thankful for you joining us here today, Mahmood. Now, in the presentation from the Atlantic Council, we also heard something about how a gender apartheid and oppression of women actually manifests itself in these countries. But I wanted to start by that anyway and ask first Mahmood and then Shah Gul, how does oppression of women and gender apartheid actually manifest itself for women in Iran and Afghanistan? Mahmood, go first, maybe.
Yes, thank you so much. And it's an honor to be here, sitting with you and sitting in a panel discussing gender apartheid and also to contribute to the gender balance in the panel. So
yes, great, thank you.
It's also good. But because I think that we are talking about fundamental human rights. These are rights that both men and women have to fight for. So I'm very glad to be here. You see, when we talk about gender apartheid or the repression that women are subjected to in Iran and probably also in Afghanistan, so there are two aspects. One is the state, and then you have the society. So I think I will just talk about the state part, which of course is very important because we know that, laws, they contribute in shaping our values. So people who are born and raised in a country where the law says that women are worth half of a man, these are also the values that we transmit. So if we look at, we find it both in the penal code. That's what we have been working with in Iran Human Rights, that, for example, a woman's testimony is worth half of a man. And in certain cases, like murder cases, a woman's testimony alone doesn't count. so there must be a man. So based on gender, they have different rights in a court of law. And then you have, the right to divorce. Of course, a man can have up to 4 wives. A woman, if she is engaged in an cannot have, of course, more than one husband, but if she is accused of having an affair, extramarital affair, can be sentenced to death by stoning, although they don't practice stoning anymore, but it's death. And then you have, as a woman, banned from certain jobs. You cannot be a judge. You cannot have high positions in the society. And you have, of course, dress code. That is, if a woman doesn't follow the dress code, can be punished. Can be punished up to 75 lashes. So we also have state-based violence against women, and this is also, contributes in increasing what I would say, domestic violence. We have domestic violence in Norway as well, and you can imagine that in a country where the law says if a woman doesn't cover herself properly, should be lashed. What kind of message it sends to a brother or a father or family members. So these are just a few, few of the ways this gender apartheid is, you find it in Iran.
Thank you. The same question goes to you, Shah Gul. What, for the women in Afghanistan, what does the oppression of women mean in daily life?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you. I want to thank Nobel Peace Center for arranging today's event. Actually, I want to say very short that there is no doubt that what is going on in Afghanistan is gender apartheid. Why? Because considering the definition of apartheid and considering the situation in Afghanistan, there is no doubt. So I want to explain the situation in Afghanistan. First of all, after 2021, the basic rights of all citizens in Afghanistan very clearly classified. Women deprived from all basic rights. They don't have rights to go to school. For example, beyond the 6th class, they don't have the chance to go to a university. Even they don't have the right to talk by phone to the media. It is, I think they don't have access to justice. They don't have the right to walk in the parks. They don't have rights to go without mahram, to travel without mahram. So there is a very clearly classification of the basic rights according to the apartheid. Number 2, women in Afghanistan face mass persecution, and their human dignity is targeted. I want to explain why it means that their human dignity is targeted. Women of Afghanistan tortured and killed every day because they participated in a protest against the Taliban. Dozens of young girls and women in Afghanistan from a specific area tortured by Taliban, abducted by Taliban because of the pretext of improper hijab, because you don't have hijab, so you should be detained and you should be sent to prison. Actually, whatever I want to say, in the situation in Afghanistan, the discrimination that considered with the Taliban, it is not a normal thing. It is in the official policies of Taliban and the official structures of Taliban. During over 2.5 years, Taliban leadership issued about 90 decrees against women. If you consider all decrees, it is about 187 from about 187. 90 decrees only is about the women of Afghanistan, and when we consider all 90 decrees, they affect all aspects of the life. As I said before, all aspects means even when you don't have mahram, when you don't have a guardian man with you, so you don't have the right even to go to a street, even to call with your relatives. So if you consider the mass persecution is a very normal thing for the Taliban. But what is the problem? How can we explain? There is a very clear segregation between men and women. There are very clear segregation between the human rights values in Afghanistan because they belong to women, because their affiliation to gender, their gender affiliation. So it means that there is no right. In that situation, how can we say? What other words shows the depth of the segregation in Afghanistan other than gender apartheid? That is why we say gender apartheid is a very clear message in Afghanistan, and whatever the Taliban do in Afghanistan clearly is gender apartheid.
Thank you both. So going into the question of today's debate, how will codifying gender apartheid as a crime under international law help this situation? Why is this strategy one that you believe in?
Actually, in Afghanistan, there is a big question. Codification of gender apartheid help the situation in Afghanistan, women of Afghanistan, or not? This is a question. And then, if you don't consider this is a solution, what is other solution? I suggest two things. It is necessary that we should codification gender apartheid as international criminal, as a criminal against humanity in international law. It is one step. It is a necessity. Why it is a necessity? Because if you consider over two past years, a lot of international organizations who defend women's rights and human rights, from the Human Rights Council in Geneva to other international organizations in all world, they had a lot of declarations. They had a lot of recommendations. They had a lot of words against the behavior of Taliban. But after 2 years, there is no change. There is no consequences for the Taliban. So what can we do? I think the most important thing is that how can we make Taliban accountable toward the international law? That is why it is important to we should codify the gender apartheid in international law. And another thing, there is a big question that maybe it is a long-term mechanism. How can we support and protect women and girls in Afghanistan in a short term? I suggest we should consider parallel works. One, we should try to criminalize the gender apartheid in international law in one side. In another side, we should have political pressure on the Taliban, because we cannot stop the progress of millions of girls in Afghanistan, and we cannot wait. Why it is important? Because this is the time that we should end the impunity of perpetrators of crime against humanity. And when we include the gender apartheid in international law, actually we want to put an end to the perpetrators of those who repeatedly have the same behavior against women. So there is no way we should consider two in Afghanistan. At least maybe about Iranian women, the situation may be a little difference, but in Afghanistan we should have these two.
Good. Yeah, that brings us to you, Mahmood. Is the situation different in Afghanistan, and do you have the same thoughts about the strategy of the campaign?
Well, I think we are talking about the same factors actually in both countries, although situation might not be exactly the same due to socioeconomic situations that, in Iran we have had a different, we have had the women's rights movement more than 100 years ago, and so there has been a very long struggle. I think that defining it as a gender apartheid or criminalizing what is happening there, it's in my view important in many ways. First of all, those who commit these, in my view, crimes against women, like, oppressing half of the population and depriving them from many of their rights because they are women, they just justify it by culture and religion. And this is a definition that also many Western countries contribute to. We accept it, that, okay, when we travel to Iran, we follow the dress code, for which Iranian women are beaten if they don't follow, and they are put in prison. But our foreign ministers, they follow the dress code because they respect the culture. But we're not talking about culture. So when we define this as what it is, that it's not culture, it's not religion, it's serious human rights violations, then we have to also treat it as such. So I think it's important, because then the world's way to treat this phenomena will change once we define it as a crime. So, and then it also sends a very important message to women and people in these countries. And we all know we are not only talking about Iran and Afghanistan. There are some other stronger and closer allies who also do the same. Women there, as long as they see that, okay, they are being suppressed in the name of religion and culture at home, and the world also calls it culture and religion, they feel powerless. But once the international community defines it as a crime, that actually is not right what's happening there, they will be empowered, because eventually it's people in those countries who are going to change the system. It's not that, Western countries should come and bring democracy and human rights. They have tried, and I think they failed some years ago, in one of the countries at least. So I think that it also will empower people. And if you look at the whole world, I think certain countries will feel that, okay, the political cost of excluding women from the society is so high that it will catalyze the reforms in some of the countries, and then we will be left with few countries who resist. And there, I think it's important to empower the civil society, the women, by showing them solidarity, by defining what they are exposed to as what it is, which is apartheid, which is serious human rights. And we have the experience from South Africa, the racial. I don't think it would have been so easy to get rid of racial apartheid if it had not been defined as a crime by the international community.
I think there's a lot to agree on, both when it comes to the description of the facts on the ground and the need for change. But Cecilia, maybe you can also help us bring in some critical perspectives here.
No, I think these are very powerful stories. I mean, and what is happening currently in Afghanistan, I believe that under current international law, it is not very difficult to make the case that some of these policies and practices do probably amount to crimes against humanity as they are currently defined under the Rome Statute, because and the draft articles on crimes against humanity, because persecution on the basis of gender is also a crime under international law already. So many of the practices that we are currently seeing by the Taliban is probably already prohibited. Now, I have two arguments that are not against the campaign, because the campaign, we all support it. I mean, there is nothing not to support with the campaign. The question about whether gender apartheid should be included into the draft articles on crimes against humanity, this is a procedural question to some extent, because the draft articles, as they have been made by the International Law Commission in 2019, just for some of you who are not versed in international law, we have three types of international crimes. In addition to aggression, we will leave that aside. We have the crime of genocide, which is really the crime of all crimes, in the way that it has been lifted up There are no technical, legal restrictions. If there is a genocide, it doesn't matter whether there is an armed conflict or not, whether it is a state or a non-state actor. If there is a genocide being committed, it is a genocide. And of course, a number of states are quarreling about whether that is actually the case in many cases. And then there are war crimes. They can be only committed when there is an armed conflict. And a number of the violations of international law that may even be perceived to be war crimes are not in the Rome Statute. They are not lifted to international crimes. So the threshold for an international crime is very high. It is not merely a violation of international law, it is a qualified violation. And this brings me to the point on crimes against humanity, because unlike genocide and war crimes, where we have conventions where most states in the world, they have ratified them and they accept the content. And then they also accept that when you violate this in a qualified manner, it is an international crime. Crimes against humanity, we do not have that, because we have the human rights conventions, and when they are violated in a systematic manner that is also an attack against the civilian population, that is when it is a crimes against humanity. But what that specifically means is, of course, not that clear, because we don't have the treaty. And this is why they have made the draft articles, because they want to kind of capture the nucleus. And then, of course, the procedure comes into question. Now we are discussing what we want to take into that convention. And there are a lot of things that are bad that perhaps belongs in that convention. The problem is that procedurally, it should not go in before the states of the world, most of the states, or even all states agree that these are international crimes that should be in the convention. And I'm not saying this in order to be difficult, but I'm saying it because if we don't do that, we risk weakening the international crimes that we have. So it's basically about this campaign being the beginning of the objective of introducing this crime also into a treaty on crimes against humanity. Now, this is one thing. So it's a question of timing, and then it leads me to the second, which is the strategy. And this is perhaps the most problematic challenge here, because what is happening in Afghanistan, I think everyone can agree that this is basically gender apartheid. The problem, of course, is that if you want to define it, do you define it as a broad gender policy, or do you define it as the most extreme versions? And very often, if you want something to become an international crime, you basically get a very high threshold, meaning that all those things that are not qualifying for that high level of systematic discrimination, that is persecution of gender, will then not qualify. So this is also a danger, basically, strategically. And I do think that when we look at the situation in Afghanistan and compare it to the situation in Iran, we both agree, we all agree that the situation for women is unacceptable. But do we agree that both situations would be included into a definition on crime against humanity, and which states would agree to that? So that is, of course, the question. I mean, it's easy for me as a Norwegian to say that I believe that a society based on a given religious legal system seems to me to be gender apartheid, but to bring along the majority of states in the world to reach that conclusion is, of course, a different thing. So again, it's also a question of strategy, and to understand that when we introduce these things into treaties, we basically get a very high threshold. As we know now, we see what is happening in Gaza. Does it reach the threshold of genocide? the persecution against the Rohingyas in Myanmar, does it reach the threshold of genocide? You see my point. So this is also the question of strategy. How does this actually affect our common campaign and fight to do something about the gender apartheid that we all agree exists in a number of countries in the world?
Exactly. I'll let both of you respond, so Mahmood can start.
Can I just ask a question? Like, I mean, in neuroscience, we don't learn about that.
No.
but like racial apartheid, that was defined as a crime against humanity. And so what is the difference?
And now, of course, I'm very happy that I am a woman, because the difference is that apartheid was against human beings based on race, which includes women, men, old and young. So the entire society, all the human beings belonging to that race. When we talk about gender, we talk about women. And this is another point that I just would like to make. When we look at the history of human rights, the human rights treaties that we have had, it is a type of tradition that primarily protects the rights of functions that normally pertain to men. Political and civilian rights in most societies in the world, those strong protections mostly protect the lives and functions and workings of males. And the females, they are subject to other types of atrocities and pressure, and they are not as well developed in international law. We have, of course, the CEDAW, we have the Convention to protect women against discrimination. We have certain things, but the human rights tradition as such, and political and civilian right, is basically against functions traditionally pertaining to males. So I think that is kind of the main reason that it doesn't really perhaps belong that well, and we try to do something about that. And of course the question is, how fast should that move, and what are the most clever strategies?
Shah Gul, I see you're burning.
Actually, I want to. Actually, I agree with 2 points. One, yes, persecution, mass persecution in Afghanistan can be defined with crime against humanity. This is correct. I agree as well that it is not an easy process. It is not an easy to reach out to that point that we want. I agree, but what is the problem? As I explained before, half of population of Afghanistan held hostage by Taliban. Afghanistan now like a prison that half of its population put in a prison separately from the other part of the society. So in that situation, what is important? I think it is violation of international order and international system in the world. It does not only belong to Afghan women or Afghanistan's people. It is like a violation of international system or international order. That is why it shouldn't be. We expect from international community, especially those countries who believe to human rights, gender equality, to support this idea. It is not only in the benefit of Afghanistan and Iran people, because we shouldn't allow Taliban's behavior to go unanswered. It is very important. And I think in a big picture, in a very big picture, I think that it is like in that situation in 21st century when a group who are under the sanction of international law, according to the Security Council resolution, they give permission to themselves to hostage half of its population. So in this case, it is very necessary that we should open a way for the future, that the future don't no one give permission to themselves to do like that. It is one thing. Another thing is that now Afghanistan is completely in the vacuum of rule of law and human rights monitoring mechanism. In that situation, even now, I don't know, you don't know, and no one knows, even Security Human Rights Council in Geneva don't know how many girls and women are in prison, how many, how and in where and in what condition they are. we don't know. The tragedy is very more deeper than what is reflected in the media or on official reports. Even we have a lot of reports that there are some places beyond the official presence of Taliban. There are some places young girls and women kept and tortured, and after a few months or after a few weeks, we can find the dead body of the person. So in that situation, it is very important to focus how can we consider the procedure to make accountable Taliban toward the international law. It is one, and how can we make the procedure that Taliban feel that their behavior have consequences. In 2 years, there is no consequences. Only I say Taliban's behavior is not so good. International community say you should change yourself. But at the end of the day, nothing changed. So how can we make the consequences for Taliban? It is very important.
And this, yeah, you can add, and it brings me to my next question.
Yeah, because I think it's, I mean, you say how fast we should do that. I think it's already too late, right? I mean, when did we abolish slavery, and when did United Nations define racial apartheid as a crime against humanity? And now we are talking about half of the world. Although right now, you know, the wealthier part of the world, women are in a better shape than countries like Iran, Afghanistan, and can we name Saudi Arabia? I mean, because, you know, it's not only, we are talking about like millions of women all over the world that in principle, each time their case is on table, we always take something else, you know, prioritize something else. We consider other things because they are like more important. Considering religion, you know, in Norway until some years ago, we fully, wasn't it so that included the Women's Rights Convention into our constitution, with the exception of the internal inre forhold I trossamfunn, how do you say it in English, right?
Internal, yeah.
Internal affairs in the, like within, so religion is more important than women's rights, right? So it has always been like this, that women's right always comes later. It's not the right time. And I think that if today is not the right time, it will never come. And I think that, you know, we should, you know, you said it so correctly. I mean, the way you put it, that okay, who has been, you know, all these conventions mainly are made by men, right? And now we are trying to, you know, we are worried that if we go too fast in defining gender apartheid as a crime, then it might have an impact on, you know, some other aspects. And I think that is wrong. Okay, I'm a human rights activist. I'm not a politician, and you can hear me, right? So I think that, you know, it's social movements that actually make changes. I don't think that we would have had an end to racial discrimination if we didn't have the civil rights movement and, you know, the anti-apartheid movement. And, you know, when I came to Norway in mid-80s, I was walking in Karl Johan. I saw all these people with buttons on their children, and it was written "Nei til apartheid" or "Free Mandela." So it was like a huge international movement that forced politicians to actually take that step, and that's what we need.
Can I just answer that? I very much agree with that, and thank you very much for doing what you do. Now, my role is somewhat different, and I just wanted to add that I think that what is currently happening in Afghanistan is probably going to be the model of gender apartheid for the future. This is exactly what that looks like. The question is, of course, in order to bring along all the states in agreement to say that this is not acceptable, we perceive this type of practice to be a crime, you need to have the Muslim states on board. you need to have at least 50 of them, preferably all of them, to say this is not Islam, this is a perverted version, which means that we consider this to be precisely what it is, a crime against women. So that is basically what is in the core of a crime against humanity. You need to have the states on board, and you need to have the relevant states on board, not Norway. Norway is on board. Mm-hmm. It's kind of, because this is not about our society, this is about what we see and how we see the difference between our reality. I mean, I live in the country in the world where I consider the liberation of women to be, you know, progressed to the highest standard in modern times. And that, of course, is a privilege. The problem is that in order to assist others, we need to work within the procedures. And that is why, in order to get to the point where gender apartheid is recognized by the majority of states as a crime against humanity, we need to have the Muslim states on board.
Good. We're actually moving towards the end. This passed very quickly. I don't know about you, but I feel like we need more time.
Can I say a little bit?
You can say something, but let me frame it as a question towards the end, and then you can say whatever you like, answer the question or not. I wanted to ask for all of you, and maybe just take a minute, because we're moving towards the end, to say, what is your vision and hope for the results of the strategy of this campaign? And, or, you know, for within the context of international law in general, what is your hope and your vision for where we could be in 10, 15 years for now, if this succeeds or we manage to use international law in a different way? I'll start with Shah Gul, maybe.
Actually, I'm not so disappointed. There are some challenging, because especially we have some problem with Muslim countries, because Taliban impose their behavior like an Islam values. Actually, it is not Islam values, but they want to impose themselves as an Islam. Even they say, we don't want to give permission to other country to speak about women of Afghanistan. No, you violated the international system, the international order. That is why all people have the right to say something. But I think it is difficult, but if we have some good strategy, we have coordination with that, we have support of Human Rights Council, we have the support of public in different country. So I think maybe it is not, I'm not so disappointed, but at the same time, we cannot wait. That is changing the situation in Afghanistan to that time. No. So it is another, but I think it is a good step, and it creates some fear inside the Taliban group that if I don't change, so we don't change, so they will do something. So I think even mentally, it is a good thing. We should pressure for gender apartheid on Taliban, and it is one procedure that we can consider.
Yes. So I mean, we should keep in mind that I think this gender apartheid has been in all religions, right? So some of them have come a bit further, but you know, it's not a long time ago that women couldn't be priests in Norway. So there has been an apartheid, there has been a movement, and of course, some countries have come further. I think we will be there one day. So the sooner we start, and you know, they have started. There have been women in Afghanistan, in Iran, in so many countries who have been paying the price. So the movement has started. So the question is whether we will support them or not. The international community will support them or not, because it's about, you know, it's so fundamental that I don't think we can think, I mean, I know there are so many technicalities, and but this is way more fundamental than that. I mean, in Norway, we do have domestic violence, and the victims are women. So violence against women is all over the world, and I don't think it's principally different from what is happening in Afghanistan or in Iran. But the main difference is that there you have the state that also contributes. And so the international communities, our tolerance for what is happening in Afghanistan and Iran and Saudi Arabia is very high, and I think it also sends the wrong signal to men all over the world. I think there is a clear, I mean, if we have time once more, we can dig into it, you know, the relation between our, how do you say it, holding it? Attitudes. Our attitudes towards violence against women and the way actually we treat state violence against women in other countries. I think we show too much tolerance to that, and as long as we do that, we will not get rid of violence against women here. It's the same as you cannot fight against, I mean, if you go back to 1970, saying that we fight against racial discrimination in Norway, but we do not define racial apartheid in South Africa as a crime. It's like saying that, okay, it's their internal affairs, we respect them, and we just make sure that we don't do the same. We are talking about attitudes and values, and you know, they don't know any boundaries.
Cecilia, some final thoughts, and then we will wrap up.
Well, yes, I'm not an activist, so I don't really have.
Sure. But you can still have a vision, no?
I do have a vision, and the vision, of course, is that states and campaigns can work together in order to strengthen the rules that we have already. And I can also say that if it were to develop into a notion shared among all major states in the world, that when the treatment of women in a society reaches a certain given point, we should actually consider it to be an international crime. We are not there today, but of course with the good of the campaign and with the horrible destiny of Afghan women these days, I mean, we might very well be there in 10 years from now.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I opened by saying that I have the privilege of being the executive director here at the Nobel Peace Center, and one of the biggest privileges is meeting extraordinary people like you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and knowledge. Here at the Peace Center, we also believe strongly in dialogue. We don't always have to agree, but we get always wiser when we talk together with respect, open mind, and listen to each other. And I think you have been demonstrating that today. For me, I have learned a lot. It has been wonderful listening to you. So thank you so much, Ingeborg Moa, for facilitating this dialogue. Mahmood Amiry-Moghaddam, thank you so much. Shah Gul Rezaie, thank you. And Cecilie Hellestveit, thank you so much. And a big applause for them. And then another privilege by being the director here is my wonderful staff. So I also want to give a warm applause to Ingvild, Helena, Tor Kenneth, Kim, Julius, Vilde, og Mette. Thank you so much for doing this. In a few minutes, there will be a concert with Masha and Mahan Wahadat in the main exhibition hall. And also remember that you're able now to explore all our exhibitions until 9 o'clock. Thank you so much for coming.